In my classes, the thing I'm asked about the most is paint to water ratio. Basically knowing how much water and paint to mix together. It's something that takes a lot of practice and is difficult because there's no formula. It changes all the time based on what you're painting. So I wanted to create a video to go over the concept and demonstrate a few techniques for you. I want to encourage you not to be hard on yourself if you don't get it straight away. Be curious and willing to mess up and just play. You're learning a new technique. Watercolors are meant to be a transparent medium, meaning when you add water to them, you can see some of the brightness of the paper behind them. Instead of adding white paint to lighten a color up, we add water to water it down. And this allows even more of the white of the paper to shine through. The paper acts as our white. So depending on how light or dark you want your colors to be, you're going to change how much water you add to your paint. In watercolors, you want to paint light to dark, meaning you want to add your lightest colors first and your darkest colors last. This can either be done in layers or by adding dark colors while the painting is still wet. To get comfortable with mixing colors, I'd recommend practicing mixing up different consistencies. I like to add water to the mixing area of my palette first by scooping water with my brush and then adding paint until it reaches the desired consistency. I'm going to demonstrate a value study. So when I talk about light and dark colors, I'm not referring to yellow being lighter color than blue. What I'm talking about is within the shade of ultramarine blue, we can make it lighter or darker using more or less water, more or less pigment. So let me show you what I mean. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get my brush nice and wet and I'm going to scoop 6 brushfuls of water onto my mixing area. And if you'd like to follow along and do this as well, you're more than welcome. If you don't want to waste your paper, that's totally okay. I really understand. If you even want to buy some cheap watercolor paper just to test out some of these techniques, I'd recommend that as well. All right, so I'm going to scoop 6 brushfuls of water onto my mixing area. We want a lot of water. Okay. And then I'm going to take just a little bit of my ultramarine and mix that in. And I want to create a nice light pale color. Like so. And you can see it has a lot more water than it does paint, than it does pigment, and it's starting to split and separate. And that's really, really normal. It tends to happen when we have more water in the mixing area. If your palette's new, you'll notice it does this as well. So there's nothing wrong when it does that. It's very, very normal. Sometimes it just repels off the plastic, but it definitely does that when we have more water in our mixing area. So I'm gonna load up my brush and I'm going to create a nice square here on my paper. And you can see this is a very, very pale shade of blue, and that's because I have a lot more water in my mixture. Now, if I add some pigment, some paint to this, and make it more of our medium consistency, we're looking for something kind of like milk or juice. And I add that next to the light blue. You can see by adding a bit more pigment, a bit more paint to my mixture, it's a lot more saturated. I'm still getting that lovely vibrancy from the white paper. It's still very luminous and has that watercolor effect. It's also blending really nicely into the light color. Now, if I add even more paint into my mixture here, gonna make an even darker, more opaque blue. I don't want it to be fully opaque though, so just be careful when you're doing this. We're not looking for a thick consistency. We still want it to move and be fluid. Something like that. You can see that's getting quite a bit darker. You can even add a little bit more. So you can see I still have a nice movement, nice fluidity to this, and it's still kind of letting some of that nice white from the paper shine through, which is important in watercolors, but it's a very rich, nice dark color of blue. So within just this one shade of ultramarine blue, I'm able to create a whole range of colors really, just by adding different amounts of water. And also in watercolors, we tend to work from light to dark because they're transparent. So usually we'll do our lightest washes first, and then when we go back in with other layers or even dropping it in while it's still wet, we can add some of our darks into that. So I hope this helps with explaining different values, and we'll be using a whole range of colors this way throughout our painting time together. To create a light wash, you add more water and less paint. To create a medium wash, we add more paint to that mixture until it's a milk or juice consistency. For a darker wash, add more paint again. And if you are creating a dark wash, make sure you don't make it too opaque. No matter the consistency, we still want the paint to move freely and easily. The next thing to keep in mind is the amount of paint on your brush. Controlling the amount of paint or water that's on your brush is so important. So here are some tips to keep in mind. While you're rinsing your brush or coming into your water, run your brush along the rim of the glass to get the excess water off. Use paper towels. I am constantly using my paper towels to dab off excess liquid from my brush. These brushes hold a lot of paint or water in them, so remembering to constantly do this prevents you from accidentally adding more water to your palette or too much paint to your paper. When painting wet on wet, there's already a lot of water on your paper, so if you add a really watery mixture, it's just going to go everywhere. Dab off some of the excess from your brush to control the paint you're adding to your wet paper. The opposite can affect you as well if you don't have enough water and your paint is too thick. You'll end up using the paint like gouache or acrylic paint, which we're not after either. Like I mentioned before, in watercolors we work from light to dark. One of the other reasons we do this is to prevent what's known as cauliflowers. Cauliflowers form when you add water or a more watery mixture to a thicker mix or paint that's almost dry. Technically, they're a mistake. However, I find that they tend to add interest to a painting, giving edges to clouds, adding texture to grass or bushes, and a bit of detail to botanical paintings. If you've noticed this happens in your painting, let it dry and embrace it as one of the beautiful happy accidents that happens in watercolors. Just to reiterate, the more water you add, the lighter or more transparent your color is going to be. And the more paint you add, the more opaque or dark your color is going to be. Don't worry if you don't get it straight away. The more you paint, the more it will make sense. The only way you're going to learn or master water to paint ratio is by actually painting and practicing. I hope this helped to explain it, and happy painting.